Hey guys, Technomentor here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to be doing the Battle of the X's. In this video, what does the Battle of the X's mean? Well, we're going to compare all the different models of the iPhone 10 lineup here. In this video, we're going to talk about the hardware, the software, and overall performance in 2021 on iOS 14 of these devices, whether you're upgrading from another device to one of these devices or comparing all these devices to see which one is for you. In this video, we're going to break all of those details down so that you can make the decision you need to. But before we go ahead and get started with today's exciting video, if you guys didn't subscribe yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we do a lot of tech news, reviews, and giveaways. Also, if you guys are in the market for an iPhone to get it at a discounted price, make sure you guys check out the link in the description section. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video review. So the first thing we want to talk about is the generation these phones were released. So right here, as you can see, is the original iPhone 10 that was released in November 2017. This is a breakthrough time for Apple because Apple released the iPhone 10. They skipped the 9. There is no iPhone 9. If you know, there is the iPhone 8, and then they decided to release the 10 or the X because that was the anniversary for 10 years of Apple phones, and that kind of started Apple with that all-screen LCD, the OLED technology coming into play. And then a year later in 2018 was when the other three devices were released. The 10R here, as you can see, was released in October, but before that the 10S was released here. The S we have released in September of 2018. So a year later, after the regular 10 was released, along with it, finally Apple introduced the Max edition of it, which the Max edition is not available on the regular 10 or the XR here. The only difference between the iPhone 10s and the 10s Max is that the Max does have a bigger battery and just slight improvement in resolution to it, nothing more. So if we're really comparing these, it's actually a comparison because the Max is pretty much like what used to be the Plus of the older generation. You're really comparing these three phones, the 10s, the regular 10, and the 10R. So that's pretty much what you're comparing. The only thing you would compare the Max is if you're looking for a bigger phone size. If you're used to sort of that Plus size, then you would probably go with the Max version of it if any of the other ones you're looking at, because they don't have the Max of it. So taking that one out of the picture, let's talk about these three other devices. First thing we want to talk about these build of that is that a lot of similarities between the iPhone 10 and the 10s compared to the R, which you'll see a lot of the differences. It's because the entry point for these two phones is that the iPhone 10, 10s, and the 10s Max, they all start at that price point of $999, pretty much $1,000, compared to the base 64 gig for the R, which is around $749 when that was released. So the R seems almost a cheaper option, hence why there's a lot of missing features on the R itself here. The R, compared to the regular, does also have slightly bigger screen though. But if we talk about all of the phones, is that the biggest screen, of course, the 6.5, the Max, because it's supposed to be the bigger phone, but then the 2S and the regular X comes with a 5.8-inch display, and the R here has a 6.1 display. So display sizes, you have the biggest, and then medium grade, and then you have this 5.8, which is really still huge. It's almost a plus size version of the regular 6, 7, and 8-inch. So not really small in that sense, but it is still big. And the other aspect we want to talk about these phones is the build of it. So all four of these phones are built with both front and back being all glass, so it's able to do wireless charging on all of the phones. One thing about it though to note is that between these devices there's sort of a slight build on it. These three phones here, the regular iPhone 10 and the 10s, have the surgical grade stainless steel body to it. And that's why you see this frame being really shiny and harder compared to the R, which has aerospace gray aluminum. So it's aluminum versus stainless steel, why you have this matte back to it. The other thing you'll notice around these devices, if we flip them over here, is to really note the difference between these devices. It's the build of these body on the back. You'll notice here we have sort of varying colors of it. We have your silver or the white edition, you have the gold, your space gray, and the product a red edition of it. Which brings us to the other point, is that the color difference between these two phones is that with the iPhone 10 lineup and the 10 Max lineup is that you're going to get the basic, your silver, your gold, space gray edition color. The iPhone 10 here does not have a gold edition though, so you're limited to only a silver and space gray edition, where the iPhone 10R opens up to a whole new set of colors that were introduced. Of course, the product red is a unique one that we have here, but there's also the blue, you have your white, your black, your coral, and the space gray edition of it. So if you're looking to really explore the other colors and that's the only thing you worry about, the R is probably what you're looking at. And the other difference that you'll see, and when you look up close a bit, is that the camera on these devices. So the iPhone 10, 10s, 10s Max all have that dual 12 megapixel camera compared to the R, which only has that single 12 megapixel lens. Aside that, that's the only noticeable you'd see. All of them have Apple logo and that iPhone written on them on the back. And let's go ahead and take a look at the display again, so we can break down on again for you guys the display and why the iPhone 10, 10s, and 10s Max has a better display than the iPhone R. It's because if you look at the display, because the OLED makes these price point almost $1,000 compared to liquid retina on the R, is the reason why it's cheaper. And when you look at the resolution, the iPhone 10 and up here have that almost that 2400 pixel by 1125 compared to the iPhone R, which has 1792 by 828. So even the resolution on the R is slightly lower, and as you go up this line, the resolution goes up. So if you're looking at resolution, you can go this way, where the Max has the biggest resolution, and then the S, and then the regular 10, and then the R here. And the other aspect is the contrast ratio. Thanks to the OLED, the iPhone 10, 10s, 10s Max all have that 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio compared to the R, which has a 14 to 1 ratio. And other similarities is that all of these phones does have true tone display, which allows the phone to adapt to the surrounding ambient lighting to adjust the display. And you have wider color to it. The only difference around these two that you notice besides the OLED is that the haptic touch on these phones. So the iPhone 10, 10s, and the 10s Max have all that 3D touch compared to the iPhone R here, which only has that haptic feedback. And you might not really notice it, but it's a difference that we do want to bring it up for anyone looking to really compare the difference between these to that aspect. And let's talk about the other piece to these phones is the weight. Of course, the Max, because it's a bigger phone, it is the heaviest. It's a little over 7 ounces or so. The iPhone 10s and the X around little over 6. The iPhone R, because it's a 6.1 display, a little bit bigger body, it's around 6.84 or 194 grams compared to the iPhone 10 and the 10s, which is around 74 and 77 grams. So the heaviest, of course, the Max, then the R, and then these two are lighter. So if that's something that you want to note on it. The other thing we want to note is the IPE rating of these phones is that the iPhone 10 and the 10R has 67 versus the X and the XS Max, which has 68 rating. What does that mean? Well, when you talk about that, you want to talk about water resistivity. The only difference is that the 10s, 10x Max are able to get 2 meters up to 30 minutes compared to 1 meter for the iPhone 10 and the 10R. But one thing to talk about when you talk about the actual water resistivity is that you do want to be careful, because if you have one of these phones and the either any sort of crack on these glass back, which are really easy to crack, either the front or the back, or any sort of damages to these phones, water will get in and they will become water damage very easily. So even though they're water resistant and has pretty high IP rating, that's something you want to take a look at. And let's talk about the next aspect about these phones is the battery life. So what kind of battery life can you expect out of these phones, and it's something that you're looking at? Well, a lot of similarities around the battery of these phones that we'll talk about is that almost all of these phones here that we have similar sort of battery built to it. They're not drastically different in terms of battery build. The iPhone R gives you about 16 hours of video playback, similar to what the iPhone Max here gives us, which is 15 hours. And then the iPhone 10 here gives you 13 hours, and the iPhone 10s here gives you about 14 hours. So the least is the 10, and then the improvement is the R, which is probably the one factor the R wins out of the competition here, and the Max comes next, and then the 10s. So battery is something compared. They're all around that same range from 13 to 16 hours at the most between these devices. So that's one thing you'll notice. The other thing we want to talk about is the chip on these phones, where because the iPhone 10 was released in 2017, the chip is the A11 chip on it, compared to the R, the S, and the Max here all have that A12 Bionic chip to it. And they also have this other difference in the chip, is that the 10 has a neural engine, and the R, S, and the Max have the second generation of neural engine, so slightly faster when it comes to things like gaming with PUBG and bigger game that requires a lot more to it on these devices. That's where you're going to see sort of that difference, is heavy gaming. Of course, if you're doing light gaming, you might not really care about that, but that's something we want to notice. The other thing we want to notice is that the RAM on these devices, the iPhone 10, 10s Max here has 4 gigs of RAM compared to 3 gigs on the iPhone 10 and the 10R. So RAM wise, these are more powerful processing for multitasking, things like that. So, and last piece we want to talk about is the camera aspect of these phones. So all 4 devices here have that sort of built-in camera. But the iPhone 10 and the 10s and the 10s Max has that dual camera to it, and that gives it a slight advantage in terms of things like photography mode, where the iPhone 10R is only limited to things such as you see here, you have studio light and contour light, compared to one of these other phones such as the iPhone 10 here, which if you look at the camera built on this one, it allows you to do a lot more in terms of photography mode, such as stage light, mono, and besides it. And even if you go up the order with the 10s, you're able to get more in terms of that. But all of them do record around 720 pixel all the way to 4K at 60 frames per second. So camera wise, the iPhone 10, 10s, 10x Max definitely had a little bit more advantage because of the dual camera built to it. But the front facing camera on these devices have the same 7 megapixel, which Apple doesn't seem to have changed on a lot of their devices. A big complaint for Apple. Hopefully they go about improving it. And let's talk about the other aspect about these phones is the iOS on these phones. So as you can see, all of these devices have been updated to iOS 14, which is the latest iOS that you can get on these devices. What does the latest iOS mean for these devices? Well, it means one thing is that most of your apps are able to download and run efficiently on this hardware and there's a lot more years to come on this. But because the iPhone 10 is a year less than the iPhone R, S, and the S Max, you're gonna see that the iPhone 10 year might get another 2 years of major update, where the other lineup here, the R, S, and the Max, might get 3 years or more. So if you're looking for a phone for 3 years or more, you might be looking at the S, X Max, or the R compared to the X. Nonetheless, all of the popular apps run flawlessly on these devices, whether you're doing social media, whether you're doing gaming, or just watching videos. The Max might be a choice if you're a person that likes to watch a lot of Netflix or things like just video streaming in general, Disney Plus, YouTube, Hulu, anything like that. Because the Max is a bigger body, 6.5 display, it gives you a bigger device in terms of that, gives you more of that real experience to it compared to the other 3 devices. Nonetheless, the OLED on the other ones are better suited for streaming and such versus the iPhone 10R here. Hence why you pay the price point of that phone. And so to bring it in to our final conclusion around these 2 phones is, what phone should you get in 2021 if you're comparing the 10 lineup here? Well, a couple things to look at. Are you looking for more power and willing to spend a little bit more? We would recommend in 2021 you get either of the S lineup here, the iPhone XS or the Max if you're looking for a phone with a bigger screen. The iPhone 10, although it has more feature than the R, it's going to get 1 year less to update, but hence you're still getting a better camera. But if you're looking for phone with the most battery, and that's the only concern, and more color variety, the R might be the only reason you get that. It's a cheaper build of it, and the reason Apple released it was to make it a little bit cheaper instead of paying almost $1,000 for the other devices. But we recommend in 2021, probably for the lineup, you might be looking at the S or the XS Max because of more iOS support, better camera, faster chip, more RAM to it, and more processing to it. So hopefully this video was helpful. We want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think? Which of these iPhone 10 do you have? If you're using one, how has your experience been? And if you're looking to upgrade it, which one would you upgrade to? Leave a comment in the comment section. Also, if you guys have any questions, leave it in the comment section. Hopefully this video was helpful for anyone looking to buy any of these devices. Please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and stay tuned for future updates. See you guys next time.